The con of the century. In 1944, Paris was liberated. In the middle of the town square, French citizens were extremely busy with a special festival, dragging Nazi collaborators into the streets, shaving their heads, humiliating them publicly, and casting them out of society. And guess whose name was next on the chopping block? Yup, Coco Chanel, the most elegant fashion queen in France, who also happened to be a high-ranking Nazi asset in their files, registered under a very wealthy-sounding codename, Westminster. However, just 2 hours after being dragged into the interrogation room while everyone was getting their clippers ready to shave her head, Chanel casually walked out, stepped into a limousine, and drove off, leaving the entire population of Paris staring in absolute shock. What on earth just happened? How did a fashionista-turned-enemy spy possess such a powerful get-out-of-jail-free card? Chanel didn't get this get-out-of-jail-free card by luck. It all came down to a cold-blooded survival instinct she had refined since the days she didn't even have a single penny. Look at Gabrielle Chanel in 1883, and you'll see a classic rags-to-riches story with zero romance. Born in a poor house, her mother died when she was 12, and her father instantly vanished into thin air to chase his own freedom. Young Gabrielle was dumped in an orphanage run by nuns. In that suffocating, strict place, you only learn 2 things: master-level sewing skills and a brutal life lesson. If you don't save yourself, this world will crush you. By her 20s, Chanel was singing in cavalry cafes just to buy bread. Her signature song was about a lost dog named Coco. To put it bluntly, her singing voice was so terrible that soldiers wanted to pay her just to shut up. But in return, the name Coco stuck with her forever. But Chanel didn't plan on singing for tips her whole life. With her innate street smarts, she caught the eyes of the wealthiest elites in France, borrowing their cash to open a small hat shop in Paris. Back then, high society women were enduring a punishment called the corset, a body-shaping undergarment that squeezed them so tightly it deformed their internal organs and left them gasping for air. Chanel looked at that thing and said, "This is toxic and cringe, get rid of it." She did something unthinkable. She took jersey fabric, a cheap material used strictly for making men's underwear at the time, and tailored it into fashion for women. Imagine rich socialites, used to expensive silk, suddenly being told to wear clothes made of underwear fabric. It sounded wrong, but once they put it on, it was comfortable, stylish, and Paris went absolutely wild. The Chanel fashion empire was officially born from a piece of men's underwear. Chanel became rich, powerful, and stood at the top of the social hierarchy. However, that exact survive and profit at all costs instinct from her impoverished childhood transformed her into a terrifyingly pragmatic opportunist. You'll notice she didn't care about morality. She only cared about who held the power so she could side with them. And when World War II arrived, this cold-blooded nature was put on full display. In 1939, Nazi forces swept into France like a hurricane, while millions of Parisians were packing their bags and fleeing in tears and panic. Chanel looked out the window and thought, this is the perfect golden opportunity to clean house. Her first move, instantly shut down her fashion boutiques, ruthlessly firing 4,000 female workers to punish them for their previous strikes demanding wage increases. Then, she packed her bags and moved directly into the Ritz, Paris, the exact hotel that had just been requisitioned as the headquarters for high-ranking Nazi officers. There, at the age of 57, the fashion queen officially swiped right on a German officer 13 years her junior, Baron Hans Gunther von Dinklage. This guy wasn't a regular soldier. He was a top-tier agent for the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police. Chanel didn't need a late-life romance. She needed his golden ticket of power to pull off a ruthless scheme, stealing her entire perfume company. To put it in simple terms, Adolf Hitler was enforcing a policy called Aryanization. This law stated that Jewish people were completely banned from owning businesses or property. Everything had to be confiscated and handed over to non-Jewish citizens. The catch? The people who funded and held a massive 90% stake in the Chanel perfume business since day one were the Wertheimer brothers, a very wealthy Jewish banking family. Chanel capitalized on her Nazi boyfriend, sending a letter straight to German officials that basically said, "Hey guys, by law, the Wertheimers are Jewish, so the Chanel No. 5 company should rightfully belong to me. Go ahead and seize it, then transfer the ownership to my name. Thanks." But Chanel was completely outclassed when playing chess with billionaire minds. The Wertheimer brothers were not about to sit around and wait to be robbed. Before grabbing their cash and fleeing to America, they foresaw Chanel's exact move. They legally transferred all their shares and company control to a trusted friend, Felix Amiot, a non-Jewish French businessman who happened to manufacture military aircraft for the French government. When Nazi officials marched into the perfume company, they flipped through the registry and said, "Wait a minute, this company's owned by a pure-blooded French citizen, not a Jew." Just like that, her corporate backstabbing scheme went down the drain. Chanel didn't gain a single penny, and her failed coup landed her straight in the crosshairs of German intelligence. To make amends to her new overlords, the fashion queen had to take on a new job title, an actual undercover spy. And so, from someone trying to use the Nazis for financial gain, Chanel officially crossed the line, receiving the agent number F7124 and the codename Westminster. By 1943, the tide of the war had completely turned. The German army was getting absolutely wrecked on all fronts, especially after their catastrophic defeat against the Soviet Red Army. Realizing the Nazi ship they were sailing on was about to sink, high-ranking SS officers cooked up a desperate, secret operation called Operational Model Hat. You can tell just by the name that it had a fashion designer's fingerprints all over it, right? What was their master plan? German intelligence knew that in her youth, Chanel had a passionate love affair with the Duke of Westminster, the richest man in Britain at the time. Through him, she became close friends with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, often joining them for hunting trips and private dinners. The Nazis told Chanel, "Look, you need to travel to Madrid, Spain, and write a private letter to your old buddy Churchill. Tell him Germany wants to sign a separate peace treaty with Britain so we can team up and fight the Soviets together." Chanel happily accepted the mission right away. In her head, she calculated that if this worked, she would be a hero to the Nazis, and if Germany lost, she'd already have a lifeline waiting for her in Britain. A perfect win-win situation. But reality is a harsh mistress, and real-world espionage has no mercy for amateurs. Chanel brought along a friend named Vera Bade Lombardi to Madrid as a cover story. What Chanel didn't realize was that Vera was actually a secret operative working for British intelligence. The moment they landed in Madrid, Vera slipped away to the British embassy and spilled the beans. "Hey, that fashion lady out there is a literal Nazi spy, and she's carrying a letter trying to bait Prime Minister Churchill." As for Winston Churchill, he was currently busy mobilizing millions of troops to flatten Germany. He didn't have the time or the mental energy to read spy mail from a fashion designer. Chanel's letter was tossed straight into the trash, and her message to Churchill was permanently left unread. Operational Model Hat failed miserably, leaving Chanel stranded. And when Germany officially surrendered, destroying the Nazi regime, Chanel found herself staring down the most terrifying charge on the books: high treason. The moment the guns of World War II fell silent, France entered a brutal season of purges. You'll notice that anyone who ever bowed to the Nazis paid a terrifyingly high price. But that rule seemed to bend right outside Chanel's suite at the Ritz. She was dragged into interrogation under a wave of public fury, only to casually walk out just 2 hours later, step into her car, and vanish like a ghost. Rumor has it that Winston Churchill personally picked up the phone to secure her release. Simply because Chanel possessed way too many private letters and dirty secrets belonging to British elites and Churchill himself. If she stood trial and decided to spill everything, it would cause a political earthquake that would humiliate an entire kingdom. The politician saved her life, but in return, she had to grab her bags of cash and flee to Switzerland, living in exile for 10 years. But a woman addicted to power and money like Chanel refused to grow old in silence. At the age of 71, watching her bank account shrink, she decided to return to Paris to reclaim her fashion throne. However, launching a comeback at 71 required a massive mountain of cash that no bank would ever lend to a woman with a treasonous Nazi spy record. And at that exact moment of despair, history cracked its bitterest joke. The people who stepped in to sign the check, financing 100% of her grand comeback, were none other than the Wertheimer brothers, the exact Jewish family she had tried to ruin and backstab using Nazi laws 10 years prior. Do you wonder why they were generous enough to rescue someone who tried to destroy them? The answer is that they were master billionaires who were coldly pragmatic. They didn't look at Chanel with hatred. They looked at her through the lens of cold numbers on a financial ledger. They understood that consumers only craved elegant tweed suits and luxury perfumes. Nobody gave a damn about what serial code the old lady cutting fabric used to carry during the war. Hatred doesn't generate profit, but the brand name Chanel certainly did. The Wertheimers agreed to fund her, and in exchange, they stripped away what she craved most: financial control and 100% total ownership of the global Chanel empire. Chanel went from being the absolute boss to essentially a highly paid employee until her very last breath in 1971. In the end, Chanel believed she had used glitz and glamour to con the world and protect her wealth. But the real masterminds of this game were the Jewish family standing behind the curtain. They turned the very person who tried to ruin them into a money-making tool, making her work to generate billions of dollars for them until her very last breath. As it turns out, in the world of money, history can be easily washed away by a scent as long as your perfume is fragrant enough to make people forget the smell of gunpowder. If you found this raw, historical drama interesting, hit that subscribe button so we can continue peeling back the curtain on history in the next videos. See you next time. Goodbye.